we should probably get started with thinking about when you and I think about developing female leaders, when you think about the kinds of people that you're interacting with, what kinds of advice do you like to give young female leaders? What's your favorite piece?
Well, before I give that advice, first of all, I want to thank you so much for that introduction and your friendship and your encouragement and inspiration and being one of those bright lights in the world that I admire. I also want to, and that's true, we've had some great personal conversations and I've learned a lot from you. And I have to acknowledge there are so many of my friends in this room and so many people that I have loved and admired who've supported me in so many ways that I would never truly be able to articulate my thanks and appreciation. I am truly humbled to sit in front of an audience of 1,600 people and have the possibility that I might say something of interest to you. So just know that to look out at the sea of faces is just humbling, and it moves me deeply. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for having me. In terms of the advice that I try to give to people, I think is mirrored or patterned off of the advice that John Rogers gave me on my first day at Ariel. So I've now been at Ariel for 25 years. I've had one job. I am the only person in my graduating class from Princeton out of 1,100 people who's had the same work phone number since I graduated. So clearly I believe in our turtle logo. And on my first day of work, John took me to TGI Fridays.
He's always had great culinary taste.
I think it was more about him than me, right? We went to TGI Fridays, he really splurged. And he said to me, I want you to understand something. You're gonna be in rooms with people who have big titles and make a lot of money. But it does not mean your ideas are not as good. I want to hear your ideas. And it is now beholden upon you to make sure you speak them and not be intimidated by the room. And that was something that I thought was a very generous and thoughtful thing to say. And when you're 22 years old and you're going into the big world of finance and you know nothing about nothing, it was a very reassuring and empowering comment to give me as a young person. And so perhaps in the same vein of Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In, it's that making sure you speak your truth is something that I think is very important. I sit in a lot of rooms with people who wait for someone to say something. Or my favorite line is, I give this all the time, at Princeton we had a professor, and if you were in a precept group with him and someone spoke and you said, I want to reiterate what Sally said, he would say, you mean iterate again, which meant you have no original thoughts. And so these are the kinds of things I think about. Have an original idea, be willing to speak it, because it will get you noticed.
Yep. I mean, one of the things I've always been struck by in spending time with you, though, is it was very clear that at a young age, Mellody, you learned to develop your own opinions, that you had very strong views, and that the way you were brought up on the South Side with your mom is you had to have an opinion about as you were sort of navigating. And it seems to me that's a theme that's pulled through, that you've been able to find opinions at an earlier point in life and speak bravely about them. I think I have to believe that it wasn't just John's encouragement, but there's something in you that's always sort of moved in that direction.
Well, I think part of it was being the youngest of 6 kids. So I'm really young in my family. My oldest sister is 2 decades plus older than me. And we have the same mother. So I tell people all the time that my family made sure I knew that I was not planned. And because my siblings were so much older than me, 5 girls, 1 boy, I basically had 5 mothers. So I had my 4 sisters, and then my mother, who were just mothers. It wasn't a sisterly relationship. I joke with people, I never got to sit in the front seat of the car. I mean, there are all sorts of things I never got. I thought chicken legs were the only thing there were. I never had a breast. So all of those things were like, I just got the other stuff, and wings. So that was the way I grew up. But the one great thing that they did, because they were so much older, they didn't treat me like a child.
Right.
And my ideas mattered. And because I was this only child in a family of 6 kids, in some ways, although I had nieces that were my own age that were more like siblings, I was very comfortable being different and standing out and having my own opinions. And my mother, in her own way, encouraged it. Even when she was very wedded to her own beliefs, especially religious beliefs, she was very tolerant of sometimes my inability to be controlled. And so that was something that was very, very helpful to me, I think, in not being afraid to speak whatever it was my truth was. Not the truth, but what my truth was. I think one thing, though, that I would say that I've had to learn to do, and I talked to you about this before once when we were sitting together, is because my opinions can come out so strong, and because I can sound so sure and confident, it can stifle other people's opinions. And I've had to work really hard in thinking about how to balance that, how to still be authentically me, but not create a scenario where others feel fear in not agreeing with me. So at Ariel, we had a coach who talked about the importance of not holding our ideas dear, and he makes a fist, and he says to hold our ideas lightly. And in holding our ideas lightly, we have the ability to change our mind. Right. Interestingly, that is very, very critical to managing money, because you must be able to change your mind about a stock at any time.
You guys have a distinct philosophy on investing, and my sense is that it also is your philosophy not on just money, but people. Right? This sense of, you know, it'd be fabulous if you really talked about how you think about the relationships you build with the companies that you buy. I love how you talk about the partnerships and how that spills over to how you think about how you invest in people over time.
Well, certainly when we're investing at Ariel, we're going to own a name from anywhere from 3, 5, 10 years. We've had some stocks in our portfolio for more than 2 decades. We've owned T. Rowe Price since 1987. We've owned Smucker for over 20 years. And I could go through lots and lots of names that we've owned. Tiffany. I mean, I just could go on and on. And so because we're going to own them for a long time, they are not pieces of paper or numbers up and down on a screen that are being traded. We own part of this business, and therefore we're in business with these people. So we must believe in them. We must trust them, have confidence in them, and at times really need to stand by them and support them as well. And we take that very, very seriously. To the extent that faith is lost, we should no longer be an investor in that company. And so we talk about that and think about that a lot in terms of Ariel. When we're buying a stock, it's very fun because we'll talk about what the business does. And I remember Clorox was a name that we owned for years and years and years at Ariel. And I used to say to people, if my name could be Mellody Clorox, I would so go for that. Because the idea that it's like under everyone's sink and it costs 83 cents a quart, and you don't make big decisions like, am I gonna feed my child to buy bleach? You know, I was like, I love that business. And that's how we think about them. Would we want to own them? Would we want to? We bought a stock once that was a mall REIT, real estate investment trust, and they owned Water Tower Place. And John was like, wouldn't you want to own Water Tower Place? And I was like, yeah, it'd be so great. It'd be so great. And in terms of people,
you have a lot of longstanding employees.
Lots of us. I mean, I'm 25 years, but there are tons of us that are in our mid-40s, and it's our only job. Yeah. So that says a lot about our organization. We really do want people who are committed to the long term. And I know that's asking a lot, especially of young people, to think, well, what do they think they're going to be? We're not saying this has to work for you, but we hope you'll keep an open mind about long term. I tell people part of the reason I think I've been able to succeed at Ariel was because I wasn't always calculating another scenario. I wasn't thinking the grass was greener somewhere else. I wasn't wasting my time doing job interviews with other people and talking to headhunters who were calling me. Charles Tribbett called John Rogers once from Russell Reynolds, and he said, she won't talk to anyone. She won't talk to anyone, and I didn't. I was like, I'm not leaving my job, and don't call me under the auspice of, can you help me think of someone? Right. And that time is very valuable. So, and that's with all due respect to a headhunter, but it was because I knew I wanted to stick this out. So we want those kind of people who are willing to think and take that long-term view, and who are really aspiring to do something special. Ariel is a grand experiment. There's no firm like us anywhere in terms of the diversity of our organization, what we're trying to do, how we are doing it, turtle logo.
You know, I think it's an important message because everybody's always telling you, you've got to be networking, you've got to be working the headhunters and everything. And yet I do think that there is something very powerful about people who know what they're committed to, right? And that's what you all spend a lot of time developing.
But it's also, I was
employees.
fortunate. I found it early. I walked in and I knew. I used to say to people, how many times will I take this elevator? I knew I would work there for the rest of my life. I mean, my poor husband, he's like, I live in Chicago. He's like, I must really love you. I left Skywalker Ranch. He's like, I live in a glass box in the sky. I'm used to trees and grass. So, you know, and he's like, but we've got Ariel.
All right, so you opened up the door on George, and I know everybody in the room is like, what is it like to be married to George Lucas? And you recently were quoted as saying that you were married to Yoda's dad.
I am married to Yoda's dad.
What is it like to be married to Yoda's dad?
George has two attributes, which one is obvious and one is probably not. The obvious one is that he's very wise. When you have an idea that lives and thrives for more than 40 years with multiple generations of people, and the messages stand the test of time, it's because those messages were very wise and very deep. And that is the deep thinker that he is. Mm-hmm. I joked with Sally last night, we were at a dinner with a very famous money manager named Bill Miller, and they were talking about George. I could not pry him away because he wanted to explore the difference between bacteria and mitochondria. And I was like, got to go. Wake up at 4, it's 9:30, gotta go. This went on too long. But there is this wisdom and curiosity and thirst for knowledge that is like, he listens to tapes about string theory. You know, everything in Indiana Jones technically works. That was very important to them. So there are all these things that are just very, very unique about him. But the wisdom part is something that has been deeply, deeply moving at times and helpful. Mm-hmm. And you know, the example that I give is during the financial crisis, we had a really, really hard time. Mm-hmm. And we were still dating. He lived in San Francisco, and I always called him at 5:30 his time in order to get him out of the bed on the treadmill. And he's like, if you could buy a treadmill that lifted me up, you would, wouldn't you? And I said, yes, I would, because I gave him a treadmill once for his birthday. And so he said to me, it was a very, very bad overnight in the stock market. We're in the middle of the financial crisis. It's horrible. Yeah. Every single day, someone fired us. Every day. It was horrible. I mean, I can't quite, and my whole sense of self was wrapped up in the brand of Ariel. Yeah. When Ariel was successful, I felt successful. When Ariel was underperforming, I felt like I was a failure. And George said to me, he says, Mellody, what do you have in Chicago that no one else has, or not many people understand? And I'm like, no idea. He said, come on, think. I'm like, I don't know. And he says, and I was like, and I really don't have time for this today. And he said, you have snowstorms, you have blizzards. And what do you know about a blizzard? I'm like, still don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, in a blizzard, you never look up at the storm, you always watch your feet. And if you look up at the storm, you are going to fall. But if you watch your feet and you just go from one place to the next, you will succeed and you will keep walking. Wow. So I went to the office and I was like, we're watching our feet, we're watching our feet. And they're like, what are you talking about? But that was the kind of wisdom, real life stories, very poignant, very specific, unbelievable storyteller that is the running narrative in my life. So that's maybe expected because of the wisdom of Star Wars. The unexpected is the humor. He's actually one of the funniest people you've ever met. Goofy, funny. I mean, the lines in Star Wars where, you know, Leia says, you know, I love you, and Han says, I know. You know, that's him. You know, those are the kind of things he does. And so having that kind of humor, you know, watching him play with a 2-year-old, sing, play.
Wait, that must be amazing.
It's stunning.
That must be amazing.
It's stunning. I mean, on the floor, you know.
Does he tell her stories?
I'm the better storyteller.
You heard that on the record.
I'm more patient. I'm more patient in a story to her. But he's better with other things, singing and playing with her, and so we're a good combination.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You've given some amazing public commentaries, but one of the ones I love most was your TED Talk on being not just colorblind, but color brave. And it's had over 1 million views, which must make you incredibly proud. And let's talk a bit about diversity and how important it is, especially we've got a whole lot of women in this room, and how you think we all need to be moving the agenda together. What advice do you want to give all of us?
The one thing about the TED Talk and this idea of being color brave, it really was born out of this idea. I've been in so many meetings, we've all been there, and people say to me, I don't even see color. I'm colorblind. Color means nothing to me. And I'm like, that is fascinating, because every single person around you is white. That is fascinating. So it would happen over and over and over again, and I was just like, stop the madness. I want you to see color, because I want you to see when it's not there. I had a colleague once, we were going down to the Rainbow Push Coalition, and it was one of my younger colleagues at Ariel who was white. And we get in the car, and she's like, am I going to be the only white person there? And I said, you have never thought about me being the only black person in many, many settings.
Right. And
she looked at me and she was like, I've never thought about that. And so I said, now I want you to think about that. Not because I'm uncomfortable or this is some cross that I bear, but I just want you to see things that you didn't see before. And I want it to be that when you're in settings that are all monolithic, homogeneous, that it's like your eyes are bleeding because it doesn't look right to you. The example that I gave is, you look at a board of directors, just make up any company, big company, and it's all white males. If I turn that scenario and it was the board of, I say in my TED Talk, ExxonMobil, and every single person at the table was black, the first thing you would say, if you saw the ExxonMobil board and they were all black, you would say, what is up with that? I want it to be that you see an all-white board and you say the exact same thing, or you walk into an all-white room and you say the exact same thing. Now, the reason that I think this is so important is because I think it makes our society better. We learn more, we are more aware, we are more tolerant when we have people around us who can teach us about different things.
Yes.
Cultures, experiences, having a different point of view, all of that enriches society. And so I will go on record right at this moment saying the dialogue that occurs in our political situation right now that is the antithesis of that, about not having Muslims in our country, is about putting walls up, about Hispanics being criminals, about playing footsie with the KKK, all of those things. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts when you're a person of color. Mm-hmm. And it hurts my soul. It hurts. And all I think about is I'm me, and I'm 47 years old, and I have all of these great opportunities and these great relationships, and I'm financially secure, and I hurt. So what does that 10-year-old in the inner city who doesn't have anything think about? It's wrong.
That commitment to these ideals, and that ability, though, Mellody, that whole, when John told you in those rooms that he wanted you to speak up at 22, because you were often the only female and the only black, how did you do it? How did you find the bravery?
I got better over time. Sometimes my voice quivered, but I said it. And what I found is the more authentic I was, the more successful I became. My goal was to be original. And I had a friend who once told me to be original means there's no one like you. And when you think of originality, I think of Michael Jackson or the Beatles, and you're like, there's no one like them. Everything else is a poor substitute. It's very hard to be original. And I thought I could be original around my ideas and my point of view. And so I got more and more comfortable with speaking them. I also realized there were ways that would work. I remember once that Jerry Reinsdorf gave me advice he won't ever probably remember. And I was in a situation where someone hadn't treated me so well. And he was like, Mellody, Don't start screaming at them and being angry. It doesn't work. And I thought at that moment, I said, I can be elegant. I can make my point, and I could do it in such a way that I leave you with my truth and hopefully the opportunity to hear it. And it took time to get that voice right. And sometimes it's been extraordinarily uncomfortable. I remember leaving a board meeting once, and one of my colleagues on the board said, give me a hug before we leave. This because we'd had such a back and forth. And I thought to myself, well, that's right. That's great. I said, come here. So, you know, there are ways that you find your own way. That has worked for me. But I don't want to leave the room not having said what I think should be said. And I've had unbelievable people around me who have taught me. I get to sit next to Howard Schultz in a meeting. Talk about bold and brave. I get to learn from Jeffrey Katzenberg. I get John Rogers. I get George, creative genius with vision who's unafraid to share it with the world. I have all these women friends who've been so bold and brave, like Sheryl Sandberg and Ariana and Dambisa Moyo, and I could just go on and on. Dambisa standing up on African debt. I mean, literally, these are people where I'm like speechless, and they give me courage. So how do I do it? I muscle all of their energy together, and I take it with me into every room and every experience, and I fight for what I believe.
And you've done it incredibly well.
Well, I don't know if I've done it well. I think I still have a long way to go, because not enough has happened. You know what we say at Ariel, we've admired these problems long enough. We've been talking about the same stuff.
Yep.
I don't want to be 85 and still talking about these issues.
One of the issues I know that you care deeply about with this vigor is women and financial health, and making sure that we all take care of ourselves. Because we have like 3 minutes before we turn to questions. Do you want to
just making sure as women that we understand that generally for women, we make our biggest financial decisions during times of great emotional stress, which is typically death or divorce. And so to be well prepared before those things happen so that we're not making decisions that affect our whole lives as well as potentially our children or our children's children without having really understood and had the right amount of knowledge and information to make those decisions. Also understanding that as women, especially those of us who have children, that our financial behaviors are passed on. Yeah. So whatever money fears we have, whatever money pitfalls that we fall into, our children are learning them in real time from us. And so when you put that hat on, you think about what you're doing very, very differently. And so just making sure that you have that financial control. Some people will say to me, I don't understand these issues. You know, I don't feel like I'm comfortable with it, etc. And I just tell them, get comfortable. And the example I give all the time is if your child's health were at stake, you would fight tooth and nail to save them. God forbid that were to occur. And from a financial perspective, we actually are putting ourselves in that same situation. So fighting tooth and nail to understand is just as important.
What are some of your favorite financial literacy causes to help people? Are there websites that you like to direct people to?
Well, I think that people have different needs. I met yesterday with one of my really good friends, Sally Krawcheck, and she started something called LVest. Yep. It's fantastic. It's still in beta stage, and it has a waiting list of about 11,000 or something like that. I don't want to misquote the number, but it was pretty staggering. And I think she's doing something very special in helping women take control of their finances. LearnVest, Alex Van Tobel, her site is fantastic, really, really great to help younger people was her target in terms of the site that she has there. Morningstar has great information. We love them at Ariel, another Chicago firm. They do a fantastic job. So the information is out there if you're willing to take the time. But I tell people just pick up the newspaper and read the middle section, which is the business section, and it just gets you more and more comfortable. I know everyone here, we're business people, but as we go out and talk to our nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles and maybe those who don't get the benefit of working in business every single day, to give them that advice, small bites. You don't have to go and read securities analysis by Graham and Dodd, but
Right,
you know,
right.
really just small bites.
Well, thank you for that. I think we're ready to open up for questions. Thanks. Okay, you've become a national and global figure. How do you find being a Chicagoan plays into that?
I think Chicago is one of the best parts of me. And the reason I say that is there is something about the Midwest, ethics, values, that I think is just very, very good to have and carry with you around the world. We're no-nonsense people. We're not caught up in a lot of things. And we have that work ethic. You know, that work ethic is, my mother used to say when I was a kid, that if you please slept past 6 a.m., the world was passing you by. And she did not let us sleep past 6 on a Saturday. And that's like what I think about the Midwest. That's what I think we are. We're these people who are robust and hardy and, you know, hardworking.
So your favorite places, like if there are 3 places, you knew somebody was coming to Chicago, you said you have to see these 3 places.
I love the path on the lake.
Yeah.
I run that path a lot. So that's one of my favorite places.
Yep.
My daughter loves the zoo, the Lincoln Park Zoo, and it's literally, it's free. It's one of the best zoos in the world. We've been to a lot of zoos, trust me. That is a great zoo. So I'm gonna give the Lincoln Park Zoo a big shout out because we go there a lot. And my third place, gosh, there's so many. I feel bad picking on any
I
one
know,
place.
I put you on the spot. You want me, I'll take you off the spot.
I would say Buckingham Fountain.
That's a pretty spectacular place, yeah.
On a hot summer day, when you get the mist on you.
Yeah.
And all the families
And you
are
can
there.
see the sailboats out on the
Yeah.
lake. Yeah, it's a pretty special day. All right. So this one, it says, what's your personal and your professional mantra? Are they the same or different? That's a hard one.
My mother gave me my one that's probably personal and professional, and she used to say it to me over and over again. And it's interesting because my mother was very introverted and not a hard driver at all. My mother, if I had like a really horrible test at school one day, and I'd say, I'm staying up all night to study for this test, she's like, don't go to school tomorrow.
But she made you be up at 6 a.m.
Take a break. You work so hard. And then, of course, I think it was like reverse psychology because then I would go crazy, like, what are you talking about? But my mother always used to say, be the labor, great or small, do it well or not at all. She thought everything you do, do to the highest level of excellence, and it did not matter what it was. And if you did not do it to the highest level of excellence, do not do it. And I've lived that motto.
And that's for both personal and professional.
Now,
right?
I think, you know, for personal, the one that I'm using lately, I had this life-changing opportunity. I mean, I literally get like teary and welled up thinking about it, to meet the Dalai Lama. And it's literally, it was like, I couldn't stop crying. I was in this little room and tears are running down.
It was just you and the Dalai Lama?
And George and his translator. And it was 20 minutes. And it was like I walked in and I felt him in such a unbelievable way. And he tells you to sit really close to him and he holds your hand. And I mean, I'm sitting really close. And I'm crying, crying, crying. This was only a couple months ago, and he pulls a Kleenex out. Like from inside his thing. And I was like, Medea does that. So he's, you know, says, you know, our purpose in life is to be kind. And if we can't be kind, at least don't, if you can't help, at least don't hurt.
Yeah.
And that was something I was like, well, that's something I want to live by.
Yeah.
So that's a new one for
nice.
me.
Very nice. All right, next one. We're all encouraged to take risks, to be brave. That was a great, by the way, your great speech at USC on bravery. So maybe that'll tie in here, we'll see. We're all encouraged to take risks. Are the consequences for risk-taking and failure greater for women?
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean don't do it.
Doesn't mean don't do it.
And the thing is about failure is, you know, it's going to happen. I have failed miserably at times. And it may not be obvious to you, but I have, miserably. So, but the question is, you know, my husband said this to the other day, again, the wisdom. He's like, you know, Mellody, what's a leader? Because I was having a really hard time. And he says, leaders, it's not about the success. It's about the fact that they get up.
Yeah.
He's like, leaders get up. And so when I think about those failures, I think about getting up. I mean, I live in a world that I cannot control, which is the stock market.
Yeah.
And you can have all sorts of things happen to you. But he said, leaders get up. And so that really shifted me, you know, in terms of when you think about failure. I heard that the CEO of Lockheed Martin, who's a woman, I heard her speak at an event, and she said that her father, when they failed, they used to have parties.
I love that.
He's like, he'd bring home a cake, and they were like failure parties, and it was to get them comfortable.
That's
fabulous. It was to get them comfortable and not to fear failure. And I was like, that's pretty great.
That's pretty amazing.
I was wondering how to do that with Everest, so you're not comfortable failing, but you don't fear it.
Yeah.
You know, it is inevitable at times in your life.
Though, what's hard for you, I would imagine, now that your life becomes more and more public, the failures. There's that sort of, there's this, you know, so.
Like when you can't give away a museum?
Right.
Brutal.
So, but one of the beautiful things I've heard you say about fear, and I have to be honest, you took my breath away with what you said to me about this last week, about bravery and fear. Are you willing to say that, or?
Prompt me again.
All right, I'm sorry, because you said you can't be brave without fear.
You can't be strong without weakness. You cannot be brave without fear.
That bravery means that you're fearful.
Bravery means that there is fear.
I thought that was fabulous.
You cannot be brave without fear. I've thought a lot about being brave, a lot. It's the number one thing I'm talking about right now, and it's the one thing I'm trying to leave with people, to be brave. To be brave and not allowing things to happen to you, to not be at the effect of the world, to control your own destiny. To be brave in speaking your truth, to be brave in controlling your own destiny, to be brave in trying to do the impossible. And when you are brave, you feel fear. You know, your chest is a little tight and you're nervous or sweaty or whatever it might be. It all affects us in different ways. But you cannot be brave without fear. I tell Everest every single day to be brave, every day. I think that's actually more important than anything, especially for girls.
For a woman. Yeah. You should look, if you get the chance to see, your USC speech is online, and it was all about just add bravery. And it really is I hear a lot of graduation speeches, and this one is really phenomenal.
Thank you.
Really phenomenal.
I was excited about that one.
Yeah. No, it's a good follow-up reading class. Yeah. So do women as leaders face a double-blind dilemma, a damned if you do, damned if you don't standard that leaves no room for error?
I think there's room for error just because it's life, and I also think that you're more damned if you don't.
More about that bravery thing and speaking up.
I mean, the idea of regrets or thinking about what you didn't do, what you didn't say, I just don't want to be that person.
Yep. So you don't want to be that person, and you have your views. So one of the things I feel like I have to ask, though, is where do you get your views? Like, where do you get you know, because sometimes we can all say we want to speak up, but to be original, Mellody, you have to have content.
Well,
what advice can we give for people about getting content? I give this
example all the time, and now my Starbucks board members will know this, but when I'm in my Starbucks board meetings, the people in the room are so smart. I mean, you have Secretary Gates and Howard Schultz and all these, Mike Ullman, who was the head of JCPenney, and these people are Clara Shih.
And Mary Dillon, who's here, right?
Mary Dillon's new. She's brand new on our board. I was so excited. Another Chicagoan from Ulta.
Yeah, she must be over there.
She is. Her first meeting was a couple months ago, and she's off to a flying start, fantastic start. But I sit in those meetings, and I give myself actually a job when I'm in the meeting. So I've read all my materials, I chair the audit committee, I'm doing all my things, but I say I'm not leaving the room without one original idea or question. And for the 2 days. So people are asking questions like, that was such a good question, I wish I had thought of it. Oh, that was such a good comment, I wish I had thought of it. But I can't speak unless it's actually original.
That's a lot of pressure.
But it actually keeps you forcing yourself. You know, I've been on the Starbucks floor for 10 years and I still do this when I'm in the meeting. I want to have an original idea or thought. And sometimes it comes when I'm reading the materials. Sometimes it comes from hearing someone else say something. Sometimes it just comes up spontaneously, but I actually work at it. So not, you know, just filling air with words. Having the words actually have some meaning and impact. The other way I think originality comes, you get inspired by other people, reading, documentaries, films, you know, having the ability to go and see people. John Rogers used to have me write to people that we did not know and ask them if we could come and see them when I was in my 20s. And that was part of my job. So he would read about someone and he'd say, I just read this article on Dick Parsons. He runs Dime Savings and Loan in New York. Get us a meeting. I'm 24. So I'm like, okay, how do I get a meeting? And I start to get very resourceful. And I'm like, Dick's a Republican, John's mother's Republican, maybe she knows him, I could call her. So I start working through all these things. So I write Dick Parsons a letter and I say, you know, we're from Chicago, we run this investment firm, we'd really love to come and see you and tell you what we're doing. We have no agenda, but just to tell you. And I read in the article that you really like bacon, and if you let us come, we will bring some.
Did it work? It worked. That's fabulous.
And to this day, Dick, I just talked to him a couple days ago, he writes notes to me and he says, your pal, Dick.
Aww.
And I literally, it's like, your pal. I was like, would I have been that thoughtful to say something like that to this 20-something? You know, he was at one point the CEO of Time Warner signing an email to me, your pal. That gives you inspiration, and that's original.
Yep.
And then I think, what's my version of that to some young person who's reaching out to me that makes them feel so special?
Yeah. That's a wonderful, wonderful story. So we now know you bring the bacon.
Well, I tell my husband, you know, who's retired, although making personal films now, I always say to him, you know, we're a one-income family. I got to go to work. We're a one-income family. We're a one-income family. I got to go to work.
That is fabulous. That is fabulous. So I think we are down to our final countdown. We talked last week when we were getting ready that there were 3 really important things that you wanted to make sure get across. One was taking control of your financial future. The other was this whole idea of bravery. And the third was about fostering diversity in organizations. And so I just wanted to sort of, as we wrap up, is there anything you want to add on one of those 3?
The only thing I would say about diversity is I just want to make sure we all understand it's all of our problems. And one of the things that I underscore in my TED Talk is that you have the ability to change the outcome too, no matter what room you're in. It could be a parents group at school. It could be in an office setting. It could be a hiring decision, that you actually are in control. I think we all think that it's all about the man and, you know, someone has, you know, made the decision for you, but we can change our own lives. We can have friends that are very diverse. The one comment about my wedding that to this day makes me feel so good is that someone in Chicago in a paper described it as a multicultural feast. That all the people there were for so many walks of life and so many settings. And I have this wonderful picture of Al Sharpton next to Eric Schmidt from Google. And I just love that, right? That's just so great. And I was like, that's what society should be.
That is a multicultural feast.
Right, it was a multicultural feast. It was. And so as a result of that, I think we can all decide what we want our lives to be, what kind of life we want for our children. Many people know my daughter is fluent in Mandarin because I want her to be of the world. I want her to really understand that what responsibilities that she has, all cultures, all people, and to truly cherish and appreciate them. And so we start in one small spot with Mandarin, next it'll be Spanish, but really to have her be someone who has that appreciation. I joke she likes rice more than potatoes. She really does, because she really does think she's part, quote, Mandarin. That's what she told us. My husband told her that she was black and white, and she said, and Mandarin.